Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. It's your favorite dark sorcerer here, Michael Lyson, aka Angelus, son of Abaddon. And tonight, I'd like to discuss a little bit about necromancy and the agents of death. Okay. In the Klapoth, you have what is known as the tree of death. Okay. And when we get into necromancy, specifically that of roughly about 500 years ago, the 15th century region, give or take a century, we deal with the Da'ath energies. This is D-A apostrophe A-T-H. Okay. And what's interesting to note about this is that the negative energies that a necromancer is known to work with, basically invoking, can cause extreme decay, a lot of pain and suffering. Okay. And I've said this before with my necromancy grimoire that I've read about once or twice right here on YouTube. Okay. Now, what's interesting to note is when we get into the agents of death, there are different classifications of these agents. Okay. See, I refer to them as agents because of the fact that in one form or another, they really are agents of death. You take the pale lady, okay, the banshee, for an example. Okay. The banshee, which is a closely resembling the Sith, okay, the Sadi in Norse mythology, okay, between the Scottish and the Welsh, is one of those harbingers of death. They predict death, okay. So then we get into the Reaper, okay, which is another agent of death whose duty is to eliminate and cause an individual to die. Okay. The vampiric is an agent of the undeath or undead, where you, much like the lycanthrope, is really a transformation from man to beast or beast to man. It's that combination, that 50-50. You're both, it's kind of like Schrodinger's cat. The theory behind that is as long as the cat's in the box, it's both dead and alive, because you don't know until you open that box up and to see if it's still living or dead. Okay. So the ghoul and not the ghoul, but the vampire itself is one of those beings that feeds off life. Okay, it feeds off the blood, whereas the lycanthrope really feeds off the flesh. Okay, 9 times out of 10 it goes for the heart or one of the major organs. Okay, the ghoul the ghoul, on the other hand, okay, which is another harbinger of death, they tend to eat both the flesh but also drink the blood. Okay. The zombie mythos is more of a dead servant, like a servitor. So in essence, it's following somebody else's dictates, which means when they're sent after something or someone, whoever gets involved or in between those two ends up dead. Okay. Now, 9 times out of 10, especially if we're dealing with Haitian voodoo, the zombie is created through the zombie powder, okay, which is made up of various different species of pufferfish, the gases of toads, and the poisons or venoms of certain frogs, specifically that of rainforest frogs. Okay, some of them have these toxins that come through their skin, so if you touch them, you get sick and eventually die unless you're treated, okay, medically speaking. Now, the black dog, also known as the hellhound, this is another form of a death agent. Okay, in this case, when you made a pact with a being such as a demon or some form of powerful entity, and you were given a certain amount of time to live, these black dogs would be sent after you to collect your soul, okay? Basically to end you by any means necessary by a vicious mauling. One of the other fascinating things about the hellhound is that in the black dog is that when you push yourself too hard, and this is something that you hear from truckers, okay, people who drive across country repeatedly without rest, which is one of the reasons why we have the laws in the United States now about 10 hours on, 10 hours off, okay, is because these truckers were known as the killer bees because they'd been working so much that they'd fall asleep or cause some form of accident because of the hallucinations and stuff. Now, it's said that a black dog is said to come for you if you've pushed yourself too far. So, in essence, this is another form of death. Okay, consider it a much like the banshee in a case where it's a fortune of what's to come. Okay, the harbinger of death, the teller that this is what's about to happen to you. So it gives you that time to either step down and rest, like the black dogs version, or you can do the banshee version, and that is where you have time to put your affairs in order and get ready for your demise. Okay. Now in necromancy, chiromancy is a very huge part of necromantic practices. In one area, you have conjuration. Conjuration is where you bring back, you summon the spirit of into full manifestation of an apparition within a triangle of evocation. The rejuvenation of a corpse is the other aspect, which is basically guiding that spirit back to its original body, its host, okay, to which it used to inhabit, to interpret, to have it answer divine spiritual questions. Okay. Now, the one thing that you also have to take into consideration with harbingers of death is the mundane variation. Okay. First, we get into herbalism, okay, and alchemy, where poisons were created to eliminate enemies. In a sense, the herbs and the attacker is committing a vicious, malicious crime, eliminating by poisoning an enemy. Okay, witches, according to Nicholas Remy's book Demonolatry, accounts 3 powders that were utilized. Black, which is to kill, and kind of an amber colored, which was to make one sick or ill, and a white powder, which is to heal. Okay. Now, what's interesting to note about the amber color is that it's very similar to the venoms and the poisons known worldwide. A lot of these things like shrubs and plants are in parks and playgrounds. Okay, but nobody really thinks twice about this, especially because it's where you take your children to play. Okay, you've heard of poison ivy. Okay, and we got stuff that deals with this, but most individuals don't take into consideration things like the little apple. Okay, or that of Orlander, maybe even the silkwood tree, the shrubs and plants, okay, that are surrounding these locations. All right. Now, for some reason, these are big around parks and playgrounds. I don't know why, which is why I'm constantly watching my son when we take him to the park to make sure that he doesn't get near these because I don't want anything to happen to him. Most people don't really consider that an issue, but they don't know what these plants and shrubs do. I do because I'm a practitioner of these plants. Okay. I'm an herbalist, an alchemist. I've studied poisons and venoms. Okay. So I know what they bring and how they react. Kind of like hemlock, which can be added into food and drink. It's tasteless and odorless. Okay. So you see, These type of things have been utilized for centuries, for hundreds of years, going all the way back into European traditions when they were used to assassinate other court members. Okay. Now, what's interesting to note is that another thing that people fail to understand is that through the rejuvenation of corpses, these things have been going on since the 15th century. If any, those of you who have ever heard of the Faustian deal, okay, Dr. Faustus, okay, in the 15th century, the 14th, 15th century, he was said to gather body parts and use electric shock therapy, okay, to rejuvenate the flesh, the dead flesh, and bring up an experiment to try to make it living. Okay, this later became known as the Faust Bach. Okay, it's gone by a couple of different names between the 15th and 16th centuries. However, since the 16th century, medical professionals, okay, yes, I'm talking about doctors who have gone to college, those who have become medical experts, have utilized everything from freezing ice water to electric shock therapy and drugs and herbs and everything to rejuvenate corpses, okay, to bring back the dead. Today, we have the little deep fib machines. We have CPR, okay? And we have drugs like adrenaline that can be placed directly into the heart to kickstart it like that. What's the difference between then and now? The laws state that you have to be a medical professional to even practice medicine, when in fact, necromancers and shamans back over 1,000 years ago worked hand in hand. They were very similar throughout their practices, through herbalism, through plants, and alchemy practices, okay? Doing rituals, having one foot in the grave. 500 years ago, blood sorcery was introduced to stave off the Da'ath energies, that negative attributes that a necromancer brings into themselves through evocations. Okay, so there's a lot of different things that have taken place over the last 1,000 years, 2,000 years even. Okay, that you can really delve into. There's many works out there from grimoires to personalized works on necromancy that really speak to agents of death. Okay, most recently, my brother and friend, okay, I'm honored to be friends with him, Edgar Cavall, sent me a book, okay, Sabbatica, okay. This is the fifth book from what I understand, and it's called The Oracles of Death, of the Dead, okay. My essay is in here, okay, which is awesome. Yeah, didn't realize my last computer basically screwed up so many times, but yeah, it's there, page 149. And then you go down a couple and you see S. Connolly. Only two people in this book outside of Edgar Cavall that I know. Okay. So when I was delving into this book, reading, because I've been excited to read these other essays from other practitioners of necromancy. And the first one that I come across when I started reading this was a kid by the name of Lucas Gurkaki. Okay. I'm probably slaughtering his name, but it was very interesting because the Nine Lords of the Underworld, okay, is the name of the essay that he wrote, and it starts on page 7. Now, keep in mind, I've studied a lot of death agents, agents of death, and gods and pantheons and stuff like that worldwide, but I never really took the time to delve into Aztec mythology. Okay, there's a few names like the god of death and the god of life that I've known, but I never really took the time to understand the nine lords there. Okay. Now, what's interesting is he really did hit on something in this essay. And it talks about the lords of the Goetia. Okay. We've all heard of the nine kings. Okay. The nine kings of the Lesser Keys of Solomon, known as the Goetias, the Goetic kings. Okay. Now, he speaks on three aspects: the lords of the night, okay, which deal with a couple of the individuals that I've known, which are found in the Codex Borgia, Codex Tudela, in the Codex Tellerano, okay, or Raymond Sis, okay. And then we get into the lords of Zybalba and the lords of Wybeti. I'm not sure if I pronounced that one right because I may have just slaughtered that all to hell. Okay. But it's spelled YBTE. Okay. Now, after I read about these four Goetic groups of these nine lords, I delved back into them. Okay. I've worked with the nine demonic kings from the Goetia. Okay. I've gotten great results from just working with them. Delving back into older myths, such as the Sith, the Banshee, the Wraith, the vampire, the zombie myths, all of this stuff. I've worked with these beings. I've gone down into Hinduism, like Shiva or Kali. Okay, I've gone into Egyptian, Roman, Greek, European, Anglo-Saxon, Scottish, Irish. I've gone through all these systems and currently been working out of the Russian system. So to see where the South American traditions, or at least central to North Americans, because the Aztecs were up in North America, Central America, and South America. Okay. This everybody knows. Okay. This is just your basic history lesson. So to actually see where these gods have so many different names, different connections worldwide, from the Goetia to Hinduism, or even in this case, Aztec, to go down through all these four different names was spectacular. So I delved into it, started taking notes, started doing my research into them. It really excited me, because I never saw this coming. I did not see the Aztec angle coming. So to delve into the Aztecs and then come up with these four names, these four types of nine beings, to see their similarities and how they equate to those of the nine kings of the Goetia. Spectacular. Right there was an enlightening mode. Okay. That was Lucifer right there saying, ding, 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 you've been enlightened. So it was awesome for me. Okay. I got all excited. I can't speak for you guys hearing this for the first time, but for me, as a scholar, somebody who loves to do research, loves to get into both rituals and books to be able to practice, incredible. Okay, I'm still doing the Russian thing. I'm still a practicing disciple, okay, for the Mazujira Cabal system, especially that of necromancy. I'm still a traditional Satanist, okay? I'm just taking my practices a lot further, okay? Evolving, which is what you're supposed to do. So, getting into these agents of death, you're going to find commonalities worldwide. And that's something that I've known for a while, but I just never took the time to delve into Aztec mythology. Okay. So, I mean, I do recommend that when you get into a system, delve into, not compare every system from Greek to Egyptian to Germanic, Slavic to Irish, Scottish, you know, all the way over here into American myths. To find out the spider mother, for an example, is both in Greek but also Native American lore. Talk about amazing and how that transpired. Okay. The Faustian myths, necromancy being associated with herbs, plants, alchemy, dealing with both rejuvenation and conjuration, and now getting into the agents of death like Anubis, Hades, Supe, Hell, Hecate, okay, Kali, or even Shiva for that matter. Okay. You see where I'm going with this. Okay. And then going into other aspects of world's myths and legends. I mean, necromancy is stuff that has been around a long time. And it's not just modern day stuff like in Harry Potter movies, Lord Voldemort, or that of, say, video games like Mortal Kombat, you know, dealing with the two villains there, okay, with these supernatural abilities to raise armies, okay. You can get into so many different myths and different legends going all the way back hundreds if not thousands of years. It's like divination, scrying, divination bowls, and cartomancy, even tessomancy for an example, are involved in necromantic practices, okay, when dealing with spirits, bringing back the dead, communing with full-blown manifested apparitions. These are nothing new. In fact, they're quite old. You can count that, what, 2,000 years ago, couple thousand years, maybe three, tea was discovered. So you can bet that tessomancy is one of the oldest known traditions out there when it comes to divination. Cartomancy, also known today as tarot card reading, goes all the way back to the 11th century. It became more popular in the 16th century. Scrying has been around in one form or another for at least the same amount of years, okay? Not just centuries. The Ouija boards, well, there's been stories of that going all the way back to the 16th century. So, I mean, and today, the Ouija board is associated with children's games. You find it in places like Toys R Us. You go to Walmart, you go to Hobby Lobbies, you're going to find it in the kids section. Okay. Even Hot Topics, which is a goth store, has it. Spencer's Gifts has it. Okay. And normally, the only reason they sell it is because of some Hollywood big show like Supernatural that slapped their logo on it. Oh, let's pay $30 for it. When in reality, it's not even worth $10. Okay. Yeah, you're welcome, Elena. Thank you for jumping on and watching. So, anyways, yeah, so I mean, everything we have today, a lot of the divination tools that we see today are wrapped up in one name, divination. When in fact, if you go all the way back to the 13th century, even back to the late Dark Ages, you're going to see what is known as the seven forbidden arts, which back in the 2nd century was actually associated with demons and 7 deadly sins. Okay. With necromancy being the blackest and most feared art. Necromancy today is out of the Greek system, meaning necro, meaning corpse or dead, practice of the dead. Okay. Negromancy, on the other hand, is the art of black magic. Okay. Negro, meaning black. Okay. It's a shame that when you hear the term Negromancy, that a lot of people associate it with slavery or hate crimes. So a lot of people really don't dare to use that terminology in today's world. It's kind of like using the swastika, which is known for hundreds of years throughout alchemy, throughout religious contexts, from Zoroastrianism to the Masons and the Masonics, and into Christianity itself. Okay, much like the cross, Okay, it's nothing new. So to assign that to, like, say, Hitler, that's all they see it as is a hate symbol. It's like, what about okay, if this is a hate symbol, how do you classify all these names that predate Adolf Hitler? Okay, it's the same thing with necromancy. So many people fear it. So many people have a misunderstanding of it because they don't want to take their time and do their research. They don't want to study it. They don't want to practice it. You know, one of the best authors out there and practitioners that I know is Sorceress Cagliostro, okay, the necromancer. Her work within blood sorcery and necromancy, specifically that of magnetics, freezing the blood, electrifying the blood, and bringing it back for scrying purposes. Incredible. Working with demons, even. Spectacular. Now, you go back to the Munich manuscripts, you're going to see where all this stuff comes from. Okay? The Munich manuscripts, which is now known as the Munich manuscripts, or the Munich handbook for the 15th century necromancer, put forth by Richard K. Keffer, okay? Which is a $40 book that you can get off eBay or Amazon, okay? Really breaks down the experiments, okay? Really breaks it down. Hey, Lord Hades. He literally breaks it down into the experiments of the illusionist tactics, okay? Which basically, in my opinion, goes with stage magicians these days, because a lot of them are just out for fame and money, okay? So they just they're just basically selling themselves to these corporations and contracts to make money and become famous. Look at Chris Angel or David Blaine, prime examples. Okay. They're not really into it for actual practices. They're not into it for actual experimentation and to literally evolve through it. Okay. Necromancy and communing with the dead is more about your personal evolution. It is more about gaining that otherworldly knowledge, that hidden gnosis, that humanity is not aware of. Okay. It's not meant to be used the way these illusionists do it. Okay. And for those of you getting into necromancy and chiromancy type practices, there's one book that I would really recommend, and let me grab that real fast. This book right here. Okay, it's called Conjuring Spirits: Texts and Traditions of Medieval Ritual Magic. And it's by Claire Fanger. Okay. This is more of a higher level train of thought. It's more of a psychological viewpoint. It's a discussion, almost like a college level course, okay, of spiritual conjurations, of certain texts, like the Grimoire of Pope Honorius, also known better as the Constitution of Pope Honorius, the Grand Grimoire Red Dragon, okay, or that of, say, for an example, the Black Raven, or let's go with the Grimoire of. It's something that suits you or it doesn't, Elena. It's necromancy is one of those practices that you're drawn to. But when you start working with spiritual aspects of it and you're getting into it more for the conjurations and the knowledge, it kind of becomes a mutual beneficial relationship between you and the spirits that you summon. For an example, in today's world, people are more comfortable calling people, spirits forth that has been around that basically passed away within the last year or two. Okay. Practitioners normally use article of clothing that the being worked or wore, like the old sackcloth stuff, the torn, raggedy clothes. Whereas in the old days, it was more of blood sorcery and calling forth through evocations, utilizing skulls and bones, even the bone castings. Okay, certain bones recommended certain things. So it's basically the same way. When you go out looking for a tarot card deck, it's said that the deck chooses you just as much as you choose the deck, because it's almost like that connection, that little static electricity that goes between you. It grabs your attention, and it's like, yeah, I got to have this. When you get into any tradition, such as necromancy, say, for example, Luciferian, witchcraft, shamanism, it's something that you're drawn to. So it's either you're drawn to it or you're not, in my opinion. A lot of people who come to me and ask, how do I know if I'm meant to walk this path? You're welcome, Elena. The thing I always tell them is, do you feel that electricity between you? Do you feel that calling? Is it something that really intrigues you? You know, hate to be that devil's advocate and ask questions with questions, but it happens, and you got to ask them and get them thinking, because necromancy is not for everybody. It's like Satanism. Satanism is not for the faint of heart. There's a reason why it's called the feared religion. It's a feared philosophy. And when you deal with demonolatry like we do, the beings, these type of beings, you tend to make enemies. And you tend to isolate yourself, much like the hermit in the Hierophant. Okay? It's the same exact thing. It's either you are or you're not, plain and simple. So, but yeah, necromancy has so many different methods and types of practices. So when it comes down to it, what you see today is more watered down. That's why I only see a few practitioners who actually do practice these arts, and that I would probably announce fully right here, like S. Connolly, okay, Edgar Cavall, you know, are just a couple of them. Go into Sumnus Dreadwood in the Mazajera Cabal system, the best necromantic rituals and historical accounts that I've ever come across. Okay, Christian Day, okay, the Witch's Book of the Dead, Lucian Raphael, the Necromancy, the Forbidden Arts. Okay, best books out there. If you want to get into the experimentations, like I said, Necromancy, the manual for the 15th century practitioner by Richard Kekeffer. Go with Sorceress Cagliostro, the Necromancer, Blood Sorcery Bible, Volume 1 and 2. Right there, those would be the books that I would recommend to you, okay? Right off the bat. Now, if you're really getting froggy about it, go into the Grand Grimoire Red Dragon. Really has the best and most accurate historical account, information-wise, of how to perform necromantic rituals, such as scrying and divination. Now, the more isolated and less topic-wise grimoire would be that of the Black Raven, okay? Otherwise known as the Threefold Coercion of Hell, which represents Zaniel, the teacher of witchcraft. Okay, everything surrounding these grimoires really get into the JCI, which is why I refer to them as the watered down, corrupted materials. So you really have to sit back and kind of discern for yourself fact from fiction. That's why I always say, don't accept things at face value. I can tell you things. Hell, I can lead you to materials, but how do you learn if you don't do your own research? Okay. That's why I live my life by two codes. One, whatever I preach, I always back it up with sources. And number two, I always make myself available to the public. All right. So, with that said, this is the first introductory into the necromantic history of death agents. Later on, I'm going to be doing some rituals and I'm going to be showing you some workings that will help you get in touch with these beings. I'll be doing things on bones and showing you how to bless them, consecrate them, and to actually set up an altar specifically for demonolatry and or spiritual workings and that of necromantic practices. All right. I hope this has been intellectual. I hope it's been educational. And I hope you do go out and get those references that I've named off. Okay. And I hope you do your own research into them. Okay. And with that said, have a good night. And until next time, this Dark Sorcerer is out. For those of you who have come on board and participated, made an appearance, thank you. It's an honor having you here. All right. You are welcome, Elena. Have a good night.